In tonight's news edition, during talks with Canada's Prime Minister, His Majesty the King urges that agreements signed by the two countries should be updated and built on. The Prime Minister tells his Canadian counterpart that despite regional turmoil, Jordan has managed to positively deal with the aspirations of its people. And the International Peace Envoy on Syria holds talks with opposition and government officials with a focus on local ceasefires and prisoner swaps. Good evening and welcome to the news. His Majesty the King held talks with Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper on trade, investment and tourism relations between the two countries. Regional developments, mainly the Palestinian issue and the Syria crisis, also figured high on the talks. More on the Canadian Prime Minister's visit is in this report.
His Majesty King Abdullah met Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his wife, who began a several-day official visit to the kingdom. During one-on-one talks, followed by an expanded meeting attended by top Jordanian and Canadian officials, the King stressed Jordan's keenness to forge closer ties with Canada in various fields. During the meeting, attended by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, the King emphasized the need to build on agreements signed between the two countries to boost ties. He also praised Canada's continued support to the kingdom, mainly in implementing developmental strategies to enhance youth's capacities. Jordan's economy, the King said, offers a safe and stable investment environment as well as incentives in various sectors. He urged Canadian businessmen to benefit from available investment opportunities and the kingdom's strategic location, which makes it a gateway to access regional markets. Turning to regional issues, King Abdullah said an independent and viable Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital is a top and strategic Jordanian interest. On Syria, King Abdullah reiterated Jordan's support of a comprehensive political solution to the crisis that ends bloodshed and preserves Syria's unity. He also warned against the repercussions of extremism, violence and terrorism on regional countries. His Majesty pointed to the burden being shouldered by Jordan as a result of hosting the largest number of Syrian refugees and hailed Ottawa's contributions in that respect. In welcoming remarks, the King said Jordan and Canada enjoy strong ties and voiced hope that the two countries would move forward and build on a bilateral free trade agreement.
On behalf of myself and the people of Jordan, to welcome you and your entire delegation here to Jordan. You and I are old friends, and it's always a delight to see you and to exchange views. And again, historically, our countries have always been very, very close on so many issues. And we have stood together on many of the challenges in the region, where Canada has played such a tremendous supportive role, whether it's been on the peace process or other areas of challenges throughout the whole of the Middle East. And again, your leadership standing by Jordan and the challenges that we have been facing is something that I continue to commend, and I'm delighted that we continue to work together. I'm delighted of the success of the meetings you've had this morning, and I hope that, again, the role that you played in moving our free trade agreement forward is something that we can continue to capitalize on, especially with the meeting today between the business community. I know that we're still at the early phases, but I'm totally convinced that both sides has a very good and exciting future on that issue.
The Canadian Prime Minister briefed the King on his tour in the Palestinian lands and Israel. He also said Ottawa was looking forward to enhancing coordination and consultations with Jordan and praised Jordan's comprehensive reforms. Harper said Jordan is a key partner of Canada in the region, mainly in the trade and security fields.
Your Majesty, I'll always remember with great fondness your visit to Canada in 2007. You were one of the first international leaders to visit me after I became Prime Minister. And it was really, in fairness, your initiative, your vision, that got us working on a trade agreement that has now been realized and implemented, and that we're now as now the basis of important discussions between our business communities to move forward. We view the Kingdom of Jordan as certainly one of our most important partners on all levels in terms of commerce, in terms of development, in terms of security in this part of the world. So we've had some great discussions this morning. You and I look forward to having them with our wider teams here, and to moving forward on a number of important projects. We have great challenges before us, but I think we have a great will to tackle them together and a great shared understanding on what needs to be done.
The Canadian Prime Minister received an official welcome upon his arrival at the Royal Office. His Majesty also hosted an official lunch banquet in honor of the guest and the accompanying delegation. Hala Debabne for the news at 10.
Separately, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour and his Canadian counterpart discussed ties and a host of issues. They voiced their satisfaction with cooperation between the two countries, mainly in the economic and trade fields, especially after their free trade agreement went into effect in late 2012. Mansour said Jordan has been able to deal positively with the aspirations of Jordanians for more democracy, freedom and openness, despite the current events in the region. The Prime Minister briefed his Canadian counterpart on the repercussions of the crisis in Syria on Jordan and efforts to achieve peace between the Palestinians and Israelis. Mansour stressed Jordan's support to efforts exerted by the United States to ensure the success of the Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. Minister of State for Media Affairs Mohammed Al-Momani said Jordan attaches great importance to the Canadian Prime Minister's visit, during which the two countries will explore ways to enhance cooperation. The minister added Harper's visit is an opportunity to discuss trade, investment and tourism. Momani hailed the evolving economic relations, especially after the activation of the Jordanian-Canadian Free Trade Agreement in 2012, which was the first free trade agreement Ottawa had signed with an Arab state. He added that the Canadian International Development Agency is one of the key supporters of Jordan, especially in the fields of education, entrepreneurship and women empowerment. The Senate Financial and Economic Committee endorsed the 2014 draft state budget and the budgets of governmental units as passed by the lower house last week. During a meeting chaired by Senate President Abdul Rauf al-Rawabda, the committee was also briefed by Minister of Municipal Affairs Walid Masri on his ministry's strategy to uplift the performance of municipalities and their role in development. The panel was also updated by Minister of Public Works and Housing Sami Halassa on road projects his ministry is implementing with funding from a Gulf Arab grant. Separately, the House Legal Committee debated an amendment to the copyright law. MP Abdel Menem Al-Oudat, who chaired the meeting, spoke of the need to amend intellectual property rights due to their economic implications and promotion of innovation and creativity. Interior Minister Hussein Al-Majali discussed with Vice President of the German Parliament, Claudia Roth, means to enhance cooperation between the two countries, especially in the fields of security, the fight against crime and anti-terrorism. Talks also touched on the latest developments in the region and ways to cope with the security, political, economic and humanitarian repercussions of the Syria crisis on the kingdom. Majali said Jordan, to the best of its ability, had provided the Syrian refugees with their education, health and security needs. The minister called on the international community to shoulder its responsibility towards the humanitarian crisis. A national conference entitled Private Sector Leads Growth opened on the Dead Sea shores. The conference, organized upon an initiative by Parliament, brought in participants from both the public and private sectors. The two-day meeting aims to draw up a 5-year strategy and set national priorities, top of which are job creation and the promotion of small and medium enterprises. Minister of Industry, Trade and Supply, Hatem Halawani, who opened the conference on behalf of Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, said private sector empowerment and job generation is an initial key step in launching ventures. Jordan told Israel it totally rejects a plan to build an airport north of the port city of Aqaba, near the border between the two countries. Jordanian officials made their point at a meeting of the joint Jordanian-Israeli Transport Committee to discuss the proposed airport project. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Sabah Rafi'i said the Jordanian side made it clear they totally rejected the airport project on technical and legal grounds. She said the officials told the Israelis that launching such facility would be tantamount to a violation of Jordan's sovereignty on its airspace and a breach of international law. They said the proposed airport project will be in violation of the 1944 Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation and the International Civil Aviation Organization. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Syria's President Bashar al-Assad is not ready to step down yet. He spoke a day after Syria's government and opposition met to launch peace talks during an international peace conference in Switzerland. Kerry said if a peace agreement is reached, many countries had offered to send peacekeepers to Syria. Meantime, UN envoy Lakhdar Brahimi met in Geneva members of Syria's opposition and government amid efforts to salvage peace talks. Here's more.
Local ceasefires and prisoner swaps are the main focus as efforts got underway to salvage Syria's peace talks. United Nations and Arab League envoy Al-Akhdar Ibrahimi met leaders of the Syrian opposition at the Geneva hotel to discuss the agenda for further talks. The opposition then went to meet officials from the United States, France and Britain. The stepped-up diplomacy followed yesterday's International Peace Conference on Syria in the Swiss town of Montreux. It marked the first step to resolve the country's civil war through talks and negotiations. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called the conference harmonious and constructive.
All the participants made very constructive and productive contributions, and there was broad support, except just the Syrians. I think almost all the countries supported these principles, that the main purpose of this conference should be implementing this Geneva Communique 1, that is establishing transitional governing body.
Officials still hope they can salvage the process by starting with more modest, practical measures to ease the plight of millions of people on the ground, especially in the areas cut off from international aid. So diplomacy has got off in earnest while the fighting rages across Syria. Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri called on all militant groups to end infighting and unite to overthrow the Syrian regime. But Syrian forces have made advances in recent weeks. Damascus hailed the reopening of Aleppo International Airport after a year's closure as a military victory over rebels. The airport in the country's largest city and former business hub was closed last year due to clashes and shelling, but military aircraft continue to use it. Hiba Al-Atoum for the news at 10.
And over to Egypt, where the country's interim Prime Minister Hazim al-Biblawi said he backed General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for president. It was one of the highest level endorsements for a widely expected presidential bid by the army chief. Sisi has yet to announce his candidacy for an election that could happen by March or April. In fresh violence in Egypt, meanwhile, 5 policemen were killed when masked gunmen attacked a checkpoint south of the capital, Cairo. The attack in the province of Beni Suef was carried out by men riding motorcycles. Hundreds of officers took part in the funeral of their fallen colleagues. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Palestinian counterpart Mahmoud Abbas held talks on the Palestinian-Israeli peace process. Welcoming the Palestinian leader at the Novo-Ogaryovo state residence outside Moscow, Putin said the leaders maintained solid relations. Russia is a member of the quartet of Middle East peace mediators, along with the United States, the United Nations, and the European Union. Unlike the United States, it supported the de facto recognition of the sovereign state of Palestine in a UN General Assembly vote last year. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, announced it plans it will visit Tehran later this week for its first regular assessment of Iran's economy in more than 2 years. An IMF mission, which is scheduled to arrive in Tehran on January the 25th, would allow the IMF to take a closer look at the impact of Western sanctions and provide an outside analysis of the economy and growth prospects. In a strong speech to delegates at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, Iran's president implicitly welcomed engagement with the West and renounced the use of nuclear weapons. The message to the delegates was firm that Iran is open for businesses. Already a number of Western oil executives met with the president this morning for talks about re-entering the country. In the plenary session, Rouhani linked improved economic growth to ending terrorist violence.
Those who are under the influence of propaganda and still believe that Iran is seeking to develop nuclear weapons, I strongly and clearly declare that nuclear weapons have no place in our security strategy and that Iran has no motivation to move in that direction.
A 38-year-old Chinese artist sort of created a new type of art, transforming what seems to be solid plaster busts into a live amorphous mass. To make his sculptures, Li uses a stencil to paste glue in narrow strips across large pieces of paper that he then sticks together to form blocks of 500. He stacks the blocks to the desired height. An average bust is over 10 blocks or 5,000 sheets of paper high, then cuts, chisels and sands the large block just as if it were a piece of soft stone. His exhibition, Tools of Study, at the Klein Sun Gallery in New York has earned him plenty of attention across the Pacific since it opened earlier this month.
我把它转变成一种游戏的工具，或者是一种装饰的工具。
We begin with tennis and the Australian Open. Melbourne's Rod Laver Arena saw a thrilling victory for Stanislas Wawrinka over Thomas Berdych. Wawrinka edged Berdych 6-3, 6-7, 7-6, 7-6 to reach the finals. Wawrinka closed out the match with a monster 214 km/h serve that whistled into Berdych's body, sparking a huge roar from the centre court crowd. He will meet either Rafael Nadal or compatriot Roger Federer. And Williams provided a first glimpse of their new Formula One car. The new model revealed the new slimline anteater style nose, expected to be seen on most cars this year after regulation changes imposed for safety reasons. Williams will also use an 8-speed gearbox for the first time this season. Finally, chilly and partly cloudy tonight with northwesterly fresh winds. Tomorrow it will be cool in most regions, but fair in the Jordan Valley, where temperatures will remain in the low 20s. Winds will be southwesterly brisk. The port city of Aqaba should expect fair conditions tomorrow with northerly brisk winds and calm seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility tonight into the early morning hours tomorrow due to fog. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Now our top stories once again. During talks with Canada's Prime Minister, His Majesty the King urges that agreements signed by the two countries should be updated and built on. The Prime Minister tells his Canadian counterpart that despite regional turmoil, Jordan has managed to positively deal with the aspirations of its people. And the international peace envoy on Syria holds talks with opposition and government officials with a focus on local ceasefires and prisoner swaps. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Raad Laptouche. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.